I was born in the year 1699 in the county of Nottingham, where my family had a small estate. My father sent me to Emmanuel College in Cambridge when I was 14 years old, where I resided for 3 years, and applied myself close to my studies, especially to mathematics and astronomy. The reader will easily believe that I could not help being very desirous to see the world, and to distinguish myself in some way beyond the narrow limits of a country life. I therefore applied myself to the study of navigation, and other branches of the mathematics, useful to those who intend to travel. After some years spent in this manner, I went to sea, and was surgeon on board a ship called the Swallow, which was bound for the East Indies. We had a long and prosperous voyage, but I did not meet with anything remarkable until we arrived at the island of Lilliput. The island of Lilliput is situated in the Indian Ocean, about 500 leagues from the coast of Sumatra. The inhabitants of this island are a small people, not exceeding 6 inches in height, and their whole appearance is proportionate to their size. As I lay on the grass, I saw a human figure approaching me, who seemed to be of a middle age, and of a middle stature, with a sword in his hand. He was followed by a great number of people, all of whom seemed to be of the same size and shape. The person who first approached me spoke to me in a language that I could not understand, but I soon found that they were attempting to converse with me. I therefore answered them in the same language, but finding that they did not understand me, I tried to express myself in several other languages. At length, one of the attendants, a man of great ingenuity, spoke to me in the Dutch tongue, which I understood. I therefore answered him in the same language, and he told me that I was a prisoner of the Emperor of Lilliput, and that I must be carried to the capital. I was taken to the capital, and was presented to the Emperor, who was a young man of great beauty and spirit. He spoke to me in a language that I could not understand, but one of his attendants interpreted his words to me. The Emperor asked me several questions about my country and my people, and I answered him as well as I could. He then asked me if I would be willing to serve him in the war against the Blefuscuians, and I told him that I would do my best to serve him. The war between the Lilliputians and the Blefuscuians had been carried on for many years, and it was occasioned by a difference in opinion about the proper way of breaking eggs. The Lilliputians maintained that eggs should be broken at the small end, while the Blefuscuians insisted that they should be broken at the large end. I was employed in the service of the Emperor for some time, and I performed several feats that astonished the Lilliputians. I was then offered a great reward if I would capture the whole fleet of the Blefuscuians, and bring it to the Emperor's harbor. I accepted the challenge, and I waded into the sea, and seized several of the enemy's ships. I then drew them after me, and brought them to the harbor. The Emperor was overjoyed at my success, and he gave me a great reward. However, not long after this I was accused of treason and I was put on trial. The charge against me was that I had urinated on the palace, which was a capital offense. I was found guilty, and I was sentenced to be blinded and to be starved to death. But I was fortunate enough to escape from my imprisonment, and I made my way to the seaside. I was taken on board a ship, and I sailed to England. After my return to England, I was appointed surgeon on board a ship called the Adventure, which was bound for the South Seas. We had a long and prosperous voyage, but we were shipwrecked on the coast of a strange country. The country was called Brobdingnag, and the inhabitants were a giant people, who were as tall as the steeples in our churches. They were a kind and gentle people, but they were also very curious. The king of Brobdingnag was a wise and just ruler, and he was very much interested in the customs and manners of other countries. He asked me many questions about England and its government, and I answered him as well as I could. The king was shocked and horrified by the state of affairs in England, and he told me that I was a reflection of the corruption and depravity of my country. He said that the English were a nation of politicians and stock jobbers, and that we were more interested in our own selfish interests than in the welfare of our country. I stayed in Brobdingnag for some time, and I was treated with great kindness and hospitality by the king and his people. However, I was eventually forced to leave the country, and I sailed back to England. After my return to England, I was appointed captain of a ship called the Hopewell, which was bound for the East Indies. We had a long and prosperous voyage, but we were attacked by pirates, and I was left on a strange island. The island was called Laputa, and the inhabitants were a people who were so wrapped up in their own thoughts and speculations that they were unable to attend to the ordinary affairs of life. They were a people of great wisdom and knowledge, but they were also very absent-minded and forgetful. The king of Laputa was a wise and just ruler, but he was also very much interested in the mathematical and philosophical sciences. He showed me many wonderful machines and inventions, and he told me about the various scientific discoveries that had been made in his country. I stayed in Laputa for some time, and I was treated with great kindness and hospitality by the king and his people. I then visited the neighboring islands of Balnibarbi, Lugnag, and Glubdubdrib, and I saw many strange and wonderful things. In Balnibarbi, I saw a people who were engaged in the most absurd and ridiculous projects, such as extracting sunbeams from cucumbers and converting ice into gunpowder. In Lugnag I met a people who were immortal, but who were also very miserable. They were afflicted with a disease that made them lose their memories, and they were forced to keep journals and records of their lives in order to recall their past experiences. In Glubdubdrib I visited the island of the sorcerers, and I saw many strange and wonderful things. I was able to converse with the spirits of the dead, and I learned many secrets about the universe. I eventually left the island of Glubdubdrib, and I sailed to Japan, where I was received with great kindness and hospitality. I then sailed back to England, where I arrived after a long and prosperous voyage. After my return to England, I was appointed captain of a ship called the Adventure, which was bound for the South Seas. We had a long and prosperous voyage, but we were shipwrecked on the coast of a strange country. The country was inhabited by horses, who were endowed with reason and intelligence. They were called Houyhnhnms, and they were a wise and noble people. The Houyhnhnms were governed by a grand assembly, which was composed of the wisest and most noble horses in the land. They were a just and equitable people, and they lived in harmony with one another. However, the Houyhnhnms were not the only inhabitants of the country. There were also a kind of creatures called Yahoos, who were brutish and depraved. They were the servants of the Houyhnhnms, and they were treated with great kindness and compassion.